to Lesbian Pirates of Baja. We are Shay and Yona, and we sail on Holoholo, our 38-foot sailboat in the Sea of Cortez, Mexico. We are in the middle of a complete refit of Holoholo. We are rebel sailors, we like to do our own work, think for ourselves, and don't like rules. We live close to nature and enjoy the rewards and trials of living on a sailboat. We value community, bartering, being free, and creating our own journey. This is very much a spiritual journey that challenges us in all ways possible.
Good morning. We just sailed off our anchor. We got this close to this boat, and now we have a little bit of breeze, and yes, land is pretty close, and we still have the anchor out just in case to give us a little insurance, but it is now 7 something. Good morning, Yona. You did a great job. And we're just ghosting, and we want to get out there.
We are looking at the weather again now for the big push across the sea. So this is probably going to take us at least 24 hours, possibly a lot more, depending on the weather.
Or less if the wind dies. Yeah.
We had to be prepared for whatever was going to happen. Yeah, so we were 2 nights in Punta Chivato because we decided that was a fantastic weather window that we needed to take advantage of. We didn't know when it would come again. It looked like the wind wasn't going to be over 15 knots, but it was going to be over 7. So between 7 and 15 knots, we were like, awesome. You know, if it's really...
We can do that.
If that's true, you know, and the swell wasn't going to be more than 3 or 4 feet.
It was more.
And
a lot more.
The weather did not turn out as forecasted, but on the forecast it looked very doable. And we
were able to sail right off the hook. We didn't need to side tie. So we were able to, and the anchorage was one other boat in the anchorage, so that wasn't an issue. But they weren't even there on deck, so they didn't know it.
But it was great. Yeah, by now, okay, we're getting used to this. Yeah. We were able to sail off the hook, out, away from shore, but it took us like hours.
It's because between Punta Chivato, there's that little island, and then we went and shot in between it because we had the wind direction right, but there's also a current that we weren't aware of, and so the current was stronger than the force of the wind to be able to have us move forward. So we just kind of went ting, ting, ting.
Yeah, again, up before dawn, you know, off the hook at just first light, and it wasn't probably until 11 a.m. that we were past the lighthouse, past the island, and it felt like the wind was filling in, and we were finally actually on our way.
So we've made it past where we were on the anchor, and we're skimming by those rocks right there, and then there's some rocks out there we need to miss, and an island. But
another quarter mile
we'll be in that wind line out there, right out there.
Okay, so we finally got to the wind.
So we have to do a little disclaimer here. We didn't know we were going to start this YouTube channel, and in this part of the our journey across the Sea of Cortez, we took absolutely zip video. Busy. It was like We're too busy being safe and
Weren't even thinking about it. We were just
No.
focused on sailing.
Yeah.
I took this 5-minute clip of myself, which is, it just is, it does nothing except show how cold I am. And that's
Lots of
it.
layers,
Like
yeah.
no photos. Oh, we took a
I'll take a quick one when Promise kept zoomed past us,
Right.
sailing
Of
past
them.
us. So we'll show you that. But yeah, so the little disclaimer. So we're just gonna kind of describe what happened. It was pretty eventful. We know that, and we had wind, but once we got past the Punta Chavato.
Once we got out of the shadow of all the islands, the wind and the waves started to increase. And for a few hours, it was really great sailing. We were moving along, we were probably going 5-6 knots, and the wind was probably 12-15 knots. So
Yeah.
it was like, this would be perfect the whole way, which is kind of what the forecast was, except the forecast was that it was going to actually die off come evening and
Right.
go
And we were
down
gonna
to
have-
zero.
Yeah, so we knew that we possibly could be floating in the middle of the Sea of Cortez with not a lot of wind.
So in fact, we wanted to make time while there was wind. I remember thinking, come on, let's really milk this. Let's push ourselves, push the boat while we have wind to get ourselves out in the middle as much as possible.
About 4 o'clock, 3:30, about 3. We had our friends Mike and his daughter Chloe zoom by us. We were planning on buddy boating, but they're so fast, they just kind of screamed on past.
So they were keeping an eye on us.
And we appreciate that.
Yeah, and so they had left Santa Rosa like, I don't know, like late morning.
Santa Rosalia,
Yeah. And they were making great time. And so they, were able to find us in the middle of the sea, and we were able to take pictures of each other and wave and say hi.
So they were able to tell us that, hey, the wind is picking up, and we already had one reef in the main and the jib partially reefed, because it was the wind was building about 15 to 18 knots at this point.
At dusk, we were double reefed, and the wind was continuing to build, and the sea state was also continuing to build.
Right. So now we have about 4 to 5 foot waves, sometimes 6.
It wasn't comfortable. It was very challenging to steer, and we were taking shifts, actually like an hour and a half, where the person off watch would go down and rest.
Yeah, there was no sleeping. There's
or
never
get some
any
food.
sleeping.
We were
Yeah.
constantly trying to get warm liquids in our body. And then the person at the helm was actively steering the boat,
Right.
was actually
Yeah.
paying attention to everything and steering the boat. And throughout the night, the winds intensified. It didn't get better. It actually, I think I remember calling you up and saying, we have to get the jib in.
Right.
And so we took the jib in, we now had we didn't have another reef in the main. This was it.
Yeah.
So it was either this configuration, or
We would have, if we had had a motor, we would have just taken all the sails down and turned the motor on and go in the direction we wanted to. So,
right. Instead, we were again keeping high, so our point of sail wasn't, comfortable.
So we didn't end up in Mazatlan.
Right. And I at a certain point, the winds were I'd say at least 20 knots, if not more.
I'd say
And
more.
the boat was heeled over more than necessary.
Necessary.
It was very uncomfortable. It
Yeah.
was challenging to even get around the boat, or to move around because of the heel on the boat, because of the amount of sail still left up, even with the double reefed main. And I
Yeah.
was running through scenarios in my head going, what if it gets worse? What's the next step? Oh, at this point, you're so exhausted. Nothing is fun. You're just trying to maintain the safety of your boat, the safety of the crew, making sure no one gets injured, that everyone's doing everything right, that everyone's on board, that it's like right now, it's like critical that you just are paying extra special attention to where you're putting every hand, every foot, that everyone's hydrated. I mean, it just is a critical moment when you're that tired. It's dark out. The wind is howling. You're at the edge. You're riding this edge.
Right, and you can't see the waves coming in,
right.
So it's always difficult.
So in my head, I was thinking, what are our alternatives at this point? If it keeps growing, because we're right on the edge of what we can safely do, we would have to head off the wind, head downwind,
right, and
go to an easier point of sail. It would make it more comfortable. We would be able to keep our second reef in, and so we'd have some control of the boat, and would just be riding quickly, very quickly downwind. Would probably pass Guaymas. I don't know ultimately where we'd end up, because I didn't know how long this wind was gonna last. Probably not that far, but
Topolobamba.
So that was, and then would have to deal with whatever that situation was being, and so there were some moments there where I was like, kind of praying, like, this is it, like, no more wind, like, this is the edge of our tolerance.
And then I think we got a call from Michael, and he said, the wind died.
Just went from, within a few miles, it went from over 20 knots to under 5.
Zip.
To nothing.
Yeah.
And the sea state, did calm down some, and we were at that point, we were 5 miles from shore.
And we were making a half a knot. Yeah, it wasn't worth it. So we decided to take everything down.
Well, it wasn't because we were making a half a knot. It was because I didn't want to be too close to shore with no wind. And now we're in traffic.
Right.
Now we have those big boats, going into the harbor that we would have to navigate under very little wind, which is very challenging to navigate with very little wind in the dark. So we decided to stay 5 miles offshore, since there was no wind now, that we weren't going to rush past Guaymas. We were high. We were
closer to San Carlos. Yeah.
And we did talk about the possibility of going into San Carlos instead, but in a way that would have been more challenging with no wind to go through that cut, and then to get into the anchorage with absolutely no wind. We were like, how's that going to work?
Because we knew it. We know that anchorage. We wouldn't be doing it, in the dark, just because we didn't know that area.
And Michael did offer to come and tow us. He said, I'll get my Zodiac, and I'll come get you and tow you. And I was like, it's not an emergency. We're fine. I mean, we're exhausted, and we don't want to be doing that anymore. And, but we're uncomfortable. But the boat was fine. We're fine. It was not an emergency situation. And so we said, no, we're just going to bob around here until sunup, until the wind comes up.
Picks up.
So I remember the sun coming up and watching the sunrise at like 5:36. And there was still no wind. It wasn't until about 7 a.m. that we started to get a little breeze, and I was able to unfurl the jib and start making way towards land. And then when you came aboard, we put up the main, and under full sail we were cruising. We were 5 knots. We were sailing around the Guaymas lighthouse and along the shore. That was probably a couple hours that we were doing that.
Yeah.
It was a nice sail. It was a really, a beam reach most of the way, and it was very pleasant for a few hours just to have that nice sail at the end of the journey. And by this time, it'd been more than 24 hours since we were awake, since we had started back in Shavato. And then I'd say about 2 miles from the marina, the wind died. So we were just kind of coasting.
As we were passing the sardine factories, yeah,
we were just kind of
Now we're stuck in the smell of the sardine factory.
The tide, I think, was coming in, so the tide was kind of taking us in very, very, very slowly. And, you know, we're only a couple miles, and we're like, oh my gosh, we just want to sleep and eat. And, you know, that part was, it felt like, to me, like we were having every single mile we had to fight for.
Right.
Like there was no free rides here. Every mile, it was like, okay, now you have to do with this. It's not going to be easy, you know, too long. You have to do this now. Now you have to do this. It was like this fight for the end.
Right. And then as soon as we got around the point to turn up into the anchorage, the wind just funneled in. So where the wind is nose on, and it's a very small little channel to go over to the marina, and there just wasn't room for us to tack back and forth. And we got to remember, we're tired. We don't want to work that hard. So we just dropped the anchor. By the time we let the anchor out, though, our butt was kind of hanging out in the traffic of the channel where the large cargo ships go. But we still went to sleep. So
yeah, we're good. We're safe. We made it.
We're not dragging. Let's go.
I mean, it was a big moment to finally put the anchor down after 30 hours.
Yeah.
I think, something like that. So 30 hours after we began, we actually made it to almost, we're like now 200 feet from our
from the dock.
From the dock. So, you know, we're this close. Again, you know, we had to work for every inch. And we just slept for like 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah, and then the wind did die down, and then we picked up the anchor. We got closer, and so at least we weren't hanging out in the channel.
And then the next morning, we got up and with no wind, when it was probably like 8 in the morning.
It was early.
And we side tied for the last time, and we were able to maneuver Holoholo into our dock space. And actually tie her to land. so that was over 50 hours from when we began from Shavato. So, and that was a big celebration. We had a little party.
I didn't drink tequila. I think I drank tequila.
It was early in the morning, but we were like, I was so relieved. I just felt like, I mean, what a huge accomplishment to do that safely and
with no engine.
All
sailing.
You know, Holoholo was fine and we were fine. Just, it took us a few days to recover from that, the physical output, the amount of focus and attention that you
have to have. That's it.
Had to have. It definitely took me a couple days before I felt like, you know, myself again, but I felt really accomplished.
I know, I did too.
I felt like we're better sailors.
I think Holoholo taught us to be better sailors.
But there's a lot of lessons in how to sail her, how to manage yourself and your own mental, your fears, your emotional, you know, why you're dealing with emergency situations.
Yeah, that lack of confidence is always there. Can I do this? You know, and for me, it's always been kind of like fake it until you make it. It's been really,
let's try this.
Yeah, it's been my whole life really. But
and we worked great together. I mean, we really showed up for each other and could just really rely on each other, and that was so huge to make it a successful journey, I think, and having our skills really balance. You know, I think it made the journey doable and nice, even though it was hard. It was still, we were good together.
Right, and that's what counts. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, you don't want to do this journey and have shouted at your spouse and said a bunch of mean things. you want to look back and have it to be a completely positive experience.
And we definitely got some respect from the community, you know, for doing this and not calling for help and not saying someone come save me, and you know, that we were willing to take on this, you know, journey is a big deal. And so I feel like it's affected me in a lot of ways that I'm, you know, still uncovering. It's been, from that perspective, it's been very magical. And I'm grateful for it.
I'm grateful for it too. I'm grateful that Holoholo taught us stuff very profoundly. And it's an incredible journey.
It is. I'm sure we'll be talking more about it.